Hello, everyone. Today we are delighted to welcome Jacqui Read to talk about her book, Communication Patterns, that have been published recently, October last year, if I'm not mistaken. Jacqui is a recognized solution and enterprise architect with hands-on experience. She has wide expertise in architecting and coding software systems. Alongside consulting, Jacqui also teaches public and private workshops and speaks at international conferences on topics such as architectural practices, technical communication, and architectural decisions. Jacqui, thanks for joining us today.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ivan. Welcome, everybody. This is an overview of soft skills for technical professionals, which is all based on some of the patterns and anti-patterns that are in my book, Communication Patterns. So let's crack on, and once I've done the presentation, I will have a look at all of the questions which you can put in on into the question box where you're viewing. So as Ivan said, I'm the author of Communication Patterns, and you can find out more on its website. There's also some bonus materials there. And you can also find out more about me on my website, and you can find me on Mastodon and LinkedIn. I'm not really anywhere else on the Bird site, anything like that. So come and join me. Now, we're going to go straight into an introduction, and at the end of this, I'm going to be looking to give away an ebook, a copy of my book. So if you would like to put a comment into the chat, then we can see who's about, and I will randomly choose a number and choose a comment at the end, and we'll see who would like to win a book. But we'll look at that at the end. So make yourself known if you'd like to be in with a chance of winning the ebook. So Nikki here, she's got this classic dilemma, technical management, which way should she go? And what skills does she actually need to succeed in either of these? But this isn't such a big secret. She also gets the same dilemma when she goes to a conference. If you're spending your training budget, if you're lucky enough to have one, to tech or not to tech, that is the question. And that is a question you should be asking yourself. We tend to try and solve problems with tech skills. We spend a lot of time and effort developing these skills, but it often doesn't work out. We find that tech skills don't solve everything. And we know this, but we feel pressure to focus on our technical skills because we're technical professionals. But the answer to Nikki's question about skills, for both of these options, you're going to need soft skills. And I'm not saying technical skills aren't important, just that soft skills can't be ignored if you want to progress your career. Now, the book is divided up into 4 different sections. We're going to go through some patterns from at least 3, hopefully 4 of those. And the first of those sections is visual communication. And visual literacy, which is the ability to understand and create visuals, is a skill architecture and software training courses are missing. And that's why I wrote Communication Patterns. It's not just about successfully conveying a message to your audience, but getting actually what you need in return as well. So let's look at the pattern. First of all, there's a pattern, face in the crowd. And this is also known as know your audience. And that's all about understanding the customer for your diagram. The different audiences need different levels of detail and even different types of diagram and visuals. This is something we all know this, but we tend to forget a lot about this. So you need to ask yourself, who is your diagram for? Who's going to be viewing it? Who's your customer for the diagram? And you can ask yourself a few questions to help you with this. So what is their technical understanding? That's going to determine what type of diagrams they're going to benefit from. Is your project manager quite a technical PM, or they're very non-technical? Does your product owner want to know about the technology, or do they just want to know how well their requirements are met by the technology choice? You can think about that. Then, what level of detail do they need? Technical or not, you need to decide what level of detail is required here. If you're presenting to an architectural review board, are they expecting a lot of detail, or are they expecting just the high level and you've covered the technical in some other review meeting? And does your development team want you to give them all the implementation details, or is it their job to determine those? And that's going to vary a lot, even within the same company. Then what do they want from you? We tend to remember this one, but what are your audience's expectations and needs? So meeting their needs is key to successful communication, because you're wanting to keep them happy. And if they don't get their needs met, then you've failed in that communication. And then this is the one that people tend to forget. What do you need from them? Do you need an agreement or sign off on your design decisions? Do you need them to make a decision based on your diagrams or presentation as a whole? Or do you need to make sure the audience, so you just need to make sure that the audience has all they need from you so that you can get what you need from them? It's kind of a chicken and egg, bit of a cyclic pattern there. But that's the one that people tend to forget. And so if you look at this diagram, who is this for? Have a think about this. You can pop this in the chat if you want to. Who of these people, who's going to benefit from this diagram? It's actually a UML class diagram here, which might be a bit of a clue. I'm just going to see if anyone's put anything. Not at the moment, but this kind of diagram is going to be for people like developers, architects, maybe it's for an SQL or a database developer. People like your product owners, they're not going to understand this. So what about another one? This one, quite a different diagram. This is a C4 context diagram. And when we're looking at this kind of diagram, this is actually a pretty universal one, really. Your product owner is probably going to be interested in this because some of that information may have even come from them. Your project manager is going to understand this, architects, developers, even those people working really down low in the weeds on the code are going to want to see this information, because everybody should have some kind of context for what they're producing. Now, an anti-pattern this time. This one, it tends to be people's favorite. It's called Explosion of Unicorns, aka also known as Too Many Colors. This is a rather colorful flow diagram. Each element does something different, so it's a different color. But that isn't useful information. We need to convey understanding without overwhelming people. You may as well show them something a bit like this. And there are far worse GIFs that I could have put on here, so you can thank me later for that. But this is the kind of overwhelm you are giving people if you use too many colors or if you use bright colors. Now, I'm not saying you can't use any bright colors, but you need to use them sparingly. And what we're using color for here is to actually communicate something. So we're showing some kind of grouping. We don't need one color per service. We're grouping by function or something like that. And if you put a key in, all the better. But you'll want to make sure it makes sense to the audience. And if you're not trying to convey that information, then don't put the color in, because people will try to ascribe meaning to any colors that you use. And if there isn't a meaning, then you're just wasting their brain power. So if you're not if you don't even need to use multiple colors in this at all. You could just use all the same color. So tips here: minimize your color palette and also use color to aid communication. Don't confuse people with it. Now, another pattern here, push in the right direction, also known as match the diagram flow to expectations. Now, all diagrams have some sort of flow of information. Whether they are showing you behavior or structure, there's probably going to be arrows going around. Now, when creating this data flow diagram, there was no thought kind of put into how the audience was going to read it. If you think about it, where do they start? It would be naturally the top left for those of us who read a language that goes left to right. But actually, in this case, it's the bottom right, down here, customer. And that's just a bit confusing. That's you're starting on a bad foot there. So let's match the expectations. And this is written in English, so we're going to definitely go left to right. And all of our commands and data are traveling from left to right. And then the data coming back from the system is traveling in the reverse direction, right to left. So we've got data going in and we've got data coming out. And this is just so much easier for people to read, and it starts on the left. People can find the start of your diagram easily. Now, here's another example. We've got everything flowing really nicely, left to right and then left to right and back again. And it's more difficult to get this wrong with a sequence diagram, but you've just got to get all of your services in the right order for things to flow nicely and be easy to read. So we're considering how your audience will read that diagram. Now, another section of the book is all about communicating knowledge. And this does involve some documentation, which I know is a bit of it can put people off, that word. And it's knowledge is documentation on a higher level. So documentation is one form of knowledge. So let's have a look at a few of these, because knowledge is one of those things in a business that is very often sort of forgotten about. It's not cared about. It's not invested in. So let's look at some ways that you can help with this. The first is a pattern. I call this products over projects, also known as organizing information by product. So many companies organize their people and work around projects. And maybe one of those projects is called Project Phoenix. Maybe if you are unlucky, you've worked on one of those. I know I have. So we have Project Phoenix, and we've got people who work on this project and artifacts and documentation that are created for this Project Phoenix. But a project works on a product, and that product has a much longer lifespan than a project, or you would hope so anyway. You don't just have one long project working on a product, so it's very rare. So tell me if you've seen anything like this. So we get another project which ends up working on this product, and maybe they call this one something more realistic, like Project Pigeon. And we get someone from the first project joins this second project, but other people leave the company, and so new people come in, and we get new artifacts and documentation are created and stored in this new project. But there's a question that's covered by documentation from the first project, and luckily someone knows where to find it. But what about all the future projects which work on this product? And when people leave, the old projects are forgotten. And who wouldn't want to forget Project Phoenix? Let's be honest with that one. And even if they aren't forgotten, it's finding product documentation is just hard. You don't know which project that piece of documentation might be connected to. And you end up with duplicated documentation because people doesn't know it exists, and it's just really hard to know what exists. And you end up basically with this kind of situation. So how can we stop the panda crying? Because we don't want to see the panda crying. So with a product mindset, we switch to this and we get a long-term focus, and it encourages thinking beyond the immediate project and focusing on that long-term view, which means the software is designed better to meet that changing needs. You're more likely to get evolutionary architecture design, like Neil Ford talks about. Then we've got collaboration and reusability. These will improve if you've got a product mindset, especially if you've got concurrent projects working on that product at the same time. We get more consistency because you can create templates and standards. They can emerge from these best practices on throughout the different projects, and people can see them and they can see these patterns. And that means you can get consistency across your projects. Visibility. When things are visible, you can see a holistic view of this product and you don't get these sort of blinkered snapshots. You don't get duplicated artifacts, and you get this whole kind of holistic view, and you can see and identify the impact of changes and see where we need to improve. Then we've got customer focus. A lot of businesses say, customer, these are really important, but then all of the systems within the business don't actually support that. And so if you focus on the product, that lends focus to the customer, because the knowledge of the customer and their needs gets taken throughout all the projects, rather than just being this set of requirements right at the beginning that then gets lost. And then we have continuous improvement. So with this project-centric approach, it encourages this continuous improvement because you can see how things are evolving over time, and you can also hopefully see other products and the projects working on them. Because if we get this visibility, as I talked about earlier, this transparency, then everyone can learn from each other. So lots of good things about having a product mindset compared to a project mindset. And you can link artifacts and documentation to that product. So depending on how you're storing it, this is going to be done in different ways, and I'll cover that in a second. But I'm not saying you can't link things to projects, and I'm not saying you can't have projects, but you need to organize things around the product so we can find things. So some practicalities for this. Centralizing documentation. This is a big part of this. And if everything can't be stored in one place, then can you create some sort of page in a wiki or something like that that links to all the places where the information is? So maybe you've got a knowledge base somewhere where things have to be kept in there for customer service or something like that. Can that be linked to from a central place? And can that knowledge base then link back to the central place as well? So look to centralize where you can. Using tags is a really good idea. Folders are very outdated. We don't store things on paper, when paper can only be stored in one place unless you've got multiple copies of it, which is not what we want to do. We want to avoid that duplication. But some kind of artifact like a diagram or documentation can have multiple categories. And so you can use tags to be able to then search, and lots of different software supports tags these days. So use tags rather than folders. Metadata, this is important. So if you use tags to categorize everything and do everything, then you're going to end up with a bit of a problem, because it's just going to be tags, tags, tags everywhere, and you don't know which one means what. You don't know which tags are the project names, which tags are the owner, which and things like that. So if you use metadata, which is basically a key value pair, you can say owner is this person and project is this. And then you can use tags sparingly for other things which maybe are very common and across projects and things like that. But use tags sparingly, use metadata as much as you can. And then if you are using folders, you need to do it strategically. So you need to organize by the product and put a folder for the product at the highest level you can. Try not to have departments at the highest level and then products within departments. It hides everything. So try and have products as your highest level if you're going to use folders. And then we get the happy panda. So I think everyone wants to make the panda happy. And honestly, if you can find stuff, it makes your life so much better. Now, another pattern in this knowledge area, this is architecture decision records, which some of you may have heard of. If you haven't, then definitely pay attention to this one. And this is all about recording your decision process and the why. And architecture decision records aren't just for software architects. So don't switch off if you're not a software architect here. Now, these records record the decision and the reasoning behind it, because when we look back at these, this is the really important information. If you're think of your future self, even in 6 months' time, thinking, why did we choose that particular technology? Why did we decide to do this on-prem? Or why did we decide to put this in GCP over Azure? If you can't remember, you're probably going to waste a lot of time doing exactly the same investigation again. So these can be either quite a lightweight record, which would be the decision and what the options were and some of the and the why, or you can actually use these to enable the whole decision process and get input from people and collect lots of information. And ADRs are really good for avoiding various problems. So changing important decisions. So after the decision's been made, maybe a long time later, someone decides to change that decision. If without knowing why that initial decision was made, that change may cause huge problems. It may go against requirements. You may not realize this until a lot of time and money has been wasted on it. So you need to know why if you're going to be trying to change these decisions. Then this is what Birgitta Böckler of ThoughtWorks calls whack-a-mole decisions. And these are the ones that just keep popping up and people keep having to smack them back down again and say, no, we made that decision for a reason. And it just wastes time again and again looking at it. And if you've got a decision record, anytime someone queries it, you can just say, look here, this is why. When you're onboarding new people onto a team, you don't want to be spending lots of time explaining everything to them, and that team member should have questions about why things were done. So part of the onboarding process will be look at all the decision records to do with this product, and then they'll know. And then we've got staff turnover. If someone leaves the company and the why a decision was made is in their head, then all that information gets lost. They've probably forgotten it too. So if you have a look on my book website, there are some examples of ADRs, and there's also a template on there, and you can use that for free. But these are just some screenshots of those examples, and the left and middle column are all one long ADR that's been used for decision making, and then the right hand column is basically the same ADR, but it's a more lightweight version of that. But as I said before, creating ADRs is not the end of the story. I was talking about products and projects and storage. We need to store these decision records where people can find and access them easily. It needs to be easy for people to integrate things into their workflow. Otherwise, they're not going to create them, they're not going to give input to them, and they're certainly not going to read them. So if that means that if people across your company are using, say, Notion or SharePoint, even if you don't like it, if people use it, then put your decision records there. Maybe you can try and migrate everything at another time to something you think is better, but put them where people are going to use them. Make it easy. Now, I mentioned before, it's not just for architects, and architecture decision records themselves should have input from people who aren't architects, but business decision records can be something that anyone in a business uses, and you get to avoid all these problems with forgetting why certain decisions were made. So these could be used in procurement. Why did you decide to choose that item over something else? And that might be software, or it might be hardware, it might be other things in your business. There's security. So what could we, why have we decided that we need to follow that particular standard? Anything to do with that kind of thing. Why was this product okayed to be released into production? Anything to do with security. Then there's also hiring. When you're, it's much better to actually record information about a decision, especially with big hiring decisions, rather than have it in someone's scribbled notes somewhere. You might want it later. And then things like strategy. When making these big decisions for a business, or even small strategy decisions in a team or in a department, it's really useful to be able to look back on them and go, oh, why did we do that? Because this isn't working, or oh, this has gone really well this year. Let's look back at this, and so we can decide where we're going next. Now, I've got another person here. This is Vlad, and he joins a team and he needs to learn about the product. Hopefully he's not just joined Project Phoenix, but maybe it was. And what he can do is read through these ADRs to get up to speed quickly. And he can find them because they're stored against the product, not the project. And then when he needs to know about the authentication, the authorization model for a product, he can then look at a template that was filled in for the security team, or what might be a security decision record. And he saved a lot of time finding that information. And look, he's even got time for tea or coffee, which is something I think a lot of us struggle to do. Now, another section of the book is about communicating remotely. And this is all about distributed teams and workers. And this might be hybrid, this might be completely distributed. But these days, we are all going to be working in probably some kind of hybrid manner at some point. So, first one is a pattern. I call this one async to think, also known as using async and sync communication aptly. So first, some definitions. Synchronous communication relies on all parties being available at the same time and responding in real time. So this type of communication completes within seconds or minutes, which means the message is received and understood, and any response was also sent, received and understood very quickly. And that's all in real time. So asynchronous communication does not assume or expect the recipient to pick up or respond to the message as soon as it's received. And this type of communication can complete in hours or days or even longer than that. And you need a combination of both. It's not all about, oh, asynchronous, it's this magic silver bullet. No, you need a combination of both. Whether you're working remotely or in an office, there's going to be trade-offs, just like everything else in software architecture and software in general, really. Now, direction matters when you're trying to work out what you should be doing. So unidirectional or one-way communication often works best asynchronously, and can have issues when it's done synchronously. So if you've got a positive or a neutral company announcement to make, that's often better done asynchronously. Then when you're bringing together many people for a synchronous announcement, that's going to sort of interrupt people. It means you've got people wasting time refocusing. And yes, so in general, one way is often best done asynchronously. There's always going to be an exception to the rule. Then bidirectional communication or two-way communication, this one varies a lot more as to whether which is best. So there's no black or white. It depends on the situation. But as a rule of thumb, synchronous is often better for like team building rapport, maybe a project kickoff, or where you're actually team building with people. And it's often better when you're wanting to generate ideas such as solutions to a problem. Then asynchronous is often better when you're trying to gather feedback on something. So it might be gathering feedback on a decision record, comments on a document, or even some sort of questionnaire. And it's also better for when you're disseminating information. As I said, when it's a positive announcement, negative announcements tend to be better in a face-to-face synchronous. When you're reporting progress, this is where it is more of a grey area. So some people will benefit, or in some situations, you'll benefit a lot more, maybe team stand-ups being a synchronous activity. But there are going to be situations where maybe you've got a team that's very experienced, or it's a team that is working on lots of separate things, and they don't really need much feedback from each other. And in that case, then some sort of stand-up or progress report might actually be better in an asynchronous method. So I like to call this an asynchronous sandwich, and I'll explain this. So for those activities that benefit from being synchronous, it's often beneficial to move some of the communication into asynchronous before and after. And so I like to call this an asynchronous sandwich, or if you've got a bit of a sweet tooth, you could call it an asynchronous macaron. And we move some of this communication, the bits that don't need to be synchronous, into a period before the synchronous activity and after that synchronous activity. And then we have the synchronous activity in the middle. And this means that we aren't wasting time on things that could be done asynchronously. And a meeting that maybe normally takes 2 hours, you may even be able to reduce that down to like half an hour, because a lot of that stuff's been done before and after, and people haven't had to take a huge amount of time out their day. And it's much easier to find a period of half an hour or an hour for everyone to get together than 2 hours. So put thought into picking your communication methods and think about whether it's going to be synchronous or asynchronous. Right, so the fourth part of the book is about multimodal communication, is what that part's called. And we're going to look at the written elements of that today. But there's also it's called multimodal because it's also about body language and other element and verbal as well, various elements like that. So we're going to look at some written parts today. And this is an anti-pattern, which I call MLAH, also known as multiple letter acronym hell. And how many times have you seen that in a diagram or a document, and you don't know what that acronym means, or you think you know what it means, but you're not sure? So the trick here is to only use defined acronyms. So here's some do's. In speech, you can say the acronym, then say the definition right afterwards. And that gives your audience the opportunity to learn it before they read it or hear it by itself. If you don't say them both and you just say the acronym or you just say the full thing. So I've been doing that today. I've been saying AKA, also known as. And that gives people the opportunity to learn it. If you only say one, even if you're saying also known as, people don't get the opportunity to learn what AKA means next time someone else says it. Then if you're writing, you can define the acronym in the text or the diagram the first time you use it, or in a key. If it's quite a long document, you may end up needing to define it more than once, but only normally in very long ones. So we're only going to be using those acronyms that are defined somewhere where people can look them up. Now, these are a few acronyms that you may know, and you can play along with this. I'll give you a few seconds for each one. See if you know what these are. DRY or DRY. What does that mean? You can give yourself a point for each of these if you want. It's only personal points. There's no prizes for them, unfortunately. So DRY, don't repeat yourself. What about DFD? And this is something that I have mentioned in this. And I'll give you a clue. The final D is diagram. Data flow diagram was that one. I wonder how many people have got 2 out of 2 so far. SPA. What does SPA stand for? Have a think. Single page application. And then finally, BLT. I think everyone will know what this one is. BLT. Of course, it is bacon, lettuce, and tomato. Or is it business leadership team? Is it basic language translator? Is it bulk loading tool? Is it just be like that? You get the point. There could be lots of different meanings, even in the same context, the same team of people, the same business. Acronyms can mean different things to different people. Even, I mean, you could grow up in the same neighborhood, go to the same school, end up in the same business, and you could still think that things mean different things to each other. So it's easy to fall into thinking that others have the same understanding as you. So you talk to people every day, and quite often people will end up just sort of pretending that they know what you mean, or you might have done this yourself. You want to avoid asking. You don't want to look foolish. And I actually found that having meetings online over Teams or Zoom or whatever you're using is actually quite good for this, because you don't have to stick your hand up and stop the whole meeting to ask what an acronym meant. You can just type it in the chat and someone will answer it for you, and you don't have to stop everybody. So use the chat, it's very useful. So next time you see an acronym, think SIDI or SIDI. State it, define it. And yes, I am being silly here. I don't want to make up another acronym, but I did just do exactly that. State it and define it. Now, another pattern here. This one is develop technical writing, also known as employ techniques for better technical writing. And this is a quick overview of several patterns that are in the book, which can help you with your technical writing. Now, technical writing is very different to creative writing. And some people here might have done some creative writing. I'm sure you did it at school. But we didn't really do technical writing. We did like non-fiction writing at school, didn't we? But you don't get taught technical writing at school. And technical is for a very specific audience. But creative writing is more of a general audience. It might be aimed at a particular age range or genre, but apart from that, technical is quite different. So one thing you can do is try to use strong verbs instead of weak verbs. And these strong verbs communicate your message much more clearly. You need to balance the use of these with your audience's understanding. You don't need to replace all of your weak verbs, but replacing some of them can help. So here we have a weak verb. The error notification happens when. If you can replace this with a strong verb, the service generates the notification when. It gives you much more information, even in just that first part of the sentence. Here's another one. Once the vector is entered, it is changed. Change that to, once the service receives the vector, it transforms. Much more information just in that tiny part of that sentence. As I said, you don't need to replace all of them. Otherwise, it's probably going to read a little bit weirdly. Now, here's another one, consistent vocabulary. You need to make sure that you're not sort of swapping in different words throughout your document. And you want to keep the same things in your document. You probably want to keep it the same within a team, within a business overall. So you want to keep this the same within your organization or your business or your company or your corporation. You want to either have an application, a program, or software. You need a user, a client, or a customer. We're not going to swap these. And are you an engineer, a programmer, or are you a developer? And when you're using different terms, you need to explicitly call these out and only use this for different things. So maybe a customer and a client mean different things, but you need to say what they mean. Use some kind of glossary, that kind of thing. Your audience needs to understand the difference so that they know that, oh, that's an internal customer for this product, but it's an external client outside of the business, or whatever it is. Right, so in summary, that brings us to the end of the patterns today. There's an awful lot more in the book. I couldn't cover all of the stuff in the book in a whole day. I think it'd probably take at least 3 days. But let's go back to Nikki. She was wondering about what skills she should have, and investing in her soft skills is investing in whatever path she chooses, and likely actually opens up those paths for her. And even if you're not looking to change any kind of direction, you are more likely to end up getting a promotion or even being offered a promotion without having to ask for it if you're using these various soft skills, because people will understand you more and people are going to notice you. Whereas if you don't develop these soft skills, you're going to be flying under the radar. So as I said earlier, you can go to communicationpatternsbook.com. There's some free resources on there, including the decision records on there. And what we're going to look at now is seeing if we can work out how we can do a raffle for people, but also I'm going to have a look through here and see what questions I've got as well. So let's have a look. Which is your favorite communication skill? That's a very difficult question. I think it's probably not so much about having favorites, but understanding that you can't just focus just on one, because if you focus just on your verbal skills, then your writing is probably going to sort of go down because you're not spending any time on it. And if you focus just on having perfect diagrams, then maybe the labels on your diagrams aren't very good because you haven't been focusing on your written skills. So I think it's all about getting a balance. So yeah, good question. Oh, someone says everybody should understand a UML class diagram. Well, I don't think most people want to. Dinosaurs would be great as an audience for a UML diagram. Possibly, yes. Right, let's see if I can find any more questions. A comment here says, I found that creating some unstructured, centralized space for keeping notes can increase productivity in the field of creating documentation. For example, a project in Notion, Miro, or Workflowy. Yeah, I think if you want people to create documentation, having them have to work out where to put it is probably a big barrier. So if there's just one big bucket, that makes it easier for people to actually create the documentation in the first place. And maybe that makes it a little bit harder to find, but at least you know it's all in the same place. So maybe you can then do some tidying up afterwards. But if people aren't creating it, then yes, having some sort of big bucket sounds like a good idea. Right, let's see. How do you link the decision or reasoning of the project that made us create the product to the product documentation itself? So with product and project, it's really all about using whatever tool you have to make sure that things are connected to each other. So if you're having to organize stuff in folders, maybe you're being forced to use just SharePoint or something like that, then have the product as the sort of the top layer, and then go down into projects, because then at least people can find things in that hierarchy. If you've got something that allows you to use the to use tags and things, then use that instead and have metadata. Right, let's see what else I can see in here. When having microservices, what is your recommendation to store ADRs inside each repository or a separate repository per team? So when we're talking about these things that are very close to the code, I think those kinds of things, putting them in a repository is quite a good idea because it's right next to the code. But when we're looking at things that are far away from the code, it's much better to put them where people can access them, because if it's very specific to the code, then it's probably the developers who need to access them, and other people in the business probably don't want to access them because they probably don't have much understanding of them. So in that case, you don't need to put it in some big centralized repository. But I think it's important to have this kind of visibility across the different projects and products. So if you are going to put things in individual repositories, then I would have some kind of centralized thing which then links to those so people can find them. But what you might want to do is have one repository that has everything to do with all the code as well. That could make it, but it's going to be different for every single person. Let's have a look. Any more? Comment here, we're wasting so much time with synchronous meetings with 10 people when you only need 5 minutes of each one. Yep, that's a place where you're going to want to think about using asynchronous. What else have we got here? You just need to be sure that people before the meeting have read the async info and thought about it. Yeah, well, hopefully people will, if people have got less meetings overall, then they can sort of schedule an hour of their time to sit down and read everything they need for all the meetings for the week or something like that. Right, what is your recommendation about acronyms? Should we have a company-wide list? Company-wide might be useful. It, as with most people in most things in software architecture, it depends. So if you've got an acronym that can mean different things in different parts of the company, having something company-wide might be really useful so that people can see there's actually 3 different meanings for that acronym in the company. And maybe when people see that, they think, oh, actually, maybe we should call some of these things something else so that we don't get confusion with this. So I think, yes, pooling stuff. So you might say each team might create their own list, and you might pull that into a department, you might pull that into a company. And that could be quite an interesting exercise, actually. Right, normally we give a service an acronym and find out that another team have the same service acronym. Do you have any advice? Yes, that could be quite difficult. I think you need to have that's when you definitely do need to centralize things. So if you do have this catalog of services in your company, and maybe you have a four-letter acronym for every service, then that's when you definitely need to have that centralization, so that you say, I want to call this service ABCD, and that centralized service goes, maybe it's automated, maybe that would be the best way of doing it. But even if it's someone who has to then go, no, sorry, we've already got an ABCD, then you can go, can we call it ABCE? And but yeah, try to have some meaning to them. But yeah, centralize that. Right, I've got time for at least 1 or 2 more questions. Someone who's got a Confluence and Notion mess. How do you start tackling a chaotic index of documentation where every person started putting their documentation their way? Good question. I think when you're looking at it, if you might have some kind of mess, you might have where you've got, I don't know, 8 different places where people have been putting documentation. I think the first step is to create one centralized, maybe like a wiki page or something like that. And maybe that's in one of those products, and you're deciding, yes, we're going to use this one. But then if you link to everything from that page, you've then got a start. And then you might say, okay, we're going to get rid of this product, and so we're going to migrate all that into here. And as you migrate it, you then update your overall page. This is a bit like the strangler fig pattern in software architecture. You then update that kind of interface page to then point to the new information. And maybe you change that slightly, maybe it ends up getting restructured. But yeah, start from that, use this strangler fig, start from that kind of page, link to everything, and then start tidying up. That's my big tip with that. Right, let's just check if there's any more. No, I've managed to get through all of those. So, right, I've just seen that APM Hub have conducted the raffle for me from all the people, and we've got a winner. And it's going to be Ivan. I'm going to try and pronounce your surname, Georgiev. But congratulations, Ivan. I believe we'll be able to contact you to get your email address. But in fact, I'm going to post that in here. In case I didn't pronounce it correctly. But yes, there we go. So yes, if you can send an email to info@opiumhub.com, then they'll pass your email on to me and I will get you an ebook. So congratulations. This has been really good. Thank you. I've had really good questions and I've really enjoyed today. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Jacqui. Thank you very much to those who participated. We'll be announcing some initiatives soon, so remember to subscribe to our newsletter and our YouTube channel. And Jacqui, thanks very much once again. We hope to see you soon, and let's keep in touch.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Bye.